Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, a vision for San Diego's new transit center, how a military property near Old Town might be transformed to meet the city's transportation goals. Caring for migrant families. Those who run a local shelter tell us about some of the health issues they're seeing as people arrive in San Diego.
Life-changing. It was amazing. We never thought we'd be able to meet her because some donors don't want to be met.
A young life saved. See the meeting between an East County girl and the kidney donor who helped her beat a rare disease.
We are the LGBTQ Historical Society of San Diego. We collect, preserve, and teach the history of San Diego and Imperial counties in northern Baja California, Mexico. And we'll take you inside the archives of San Diego's LGBTQ history. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. It's Wednesday, July 10th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. A military property in the heart of San Diego might become the city's next big transit hub. The plan would repurpose Spay War on Pacific Highway near Old Town. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen tells us how Sandag and the military are working together.
The 70-acre property right next to the I-5 freeway currently houses the Navy's information warfare operations. The space is underutilized and outdated, and the Navy has been seeking ideas for how to redevelop it. Sandag, San Diego County's regional planning agency, has now signed a memorandum of understanding with the Navy to open discussions on how a transit connection to the airport can become part of the project.
Today is a very important step forward.
San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer says it's a good example of governments working together.
It allows the Navy to better understand our goals and our vision as a region. And it allows Sandag to understand how our goals can be incorporated into the Navy's own very important redevelopment plans.
Just last week, the San Diego Airport Authority announced an agreement with airline partners to spend more than $500 million improving transportation to the airport. Sandag Executive Director Hassan Akrada says he hopes the redeveloped naval base can also include thousands of new homes.
The biggest barriers right now is us believing we can do this. You know, we in San Diego need to believe that difficult and expensive is not a reason to stop pursuing big stuff.
Officials hope to have a development plan in the next few years. A potential rail line to the airport would likely come several years after that. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
The military is also on the agenda for Vice President Mike Pence in his visit to San Diego. Pence is expected to arrive tonight. He spent the day visiting Air Force bases in Central California. There he was briefed on the recent earthquakes. The Vice President will visit Navy and Coast Guard officials tomorrow in Coronado. The Trump administration isn't backing away from planned immigration raids. The acting director of the agency in charge of ICE says it will happen, but details on when and where won't be made public.
They're absolutely going to happen. There's approximately 1 million people in this country with removal orders. Of course, that isn't what ICE will go after in this, but that's the pool of people who've been all the way through the due process chain.
Last month, President Trump announced raids were imminent. He later delayed the plan and said he would give Congress time to work on the issue. Border Protection says it has largely reduced the number of unaccompanied children in its custody. Last month, nearly 3,000 were being held. Now the agency says that number is 200. AP reporter John Moan shows us a new shelter where some of those children are going.
Before the sweltering Texas sun heats up Carrizo Springs, the children start their day early. Breakfast at sunrise. About 225 boys and girls, unaccompanied teens in a holding center for detained migrant children, are at this converted oil worker camp run by the Department of Health and Human Services.
The reason for Carrizo Springs and the reason why we stood this up is, again, not to allow children to stay in Border Patrol stations any longer than they need to.
Long trailers that housed laborers during the shale oil boom are now suites converted into 12-person dorms. 2 pairs of bunk beds in each bedroom and the living room.
This facility is all about unification. We immediately begin the process of finding a sponsor for that child once they're turned over to HHS.
I pledge
HHS provides the teens with 6 hours daily classroom instruction, access to arts and crafts, 3 meals a day and snacks, access to call centers to reconnect with family, then legal services. And as the contractor running the holding facility describes, most importantly, they provide playtime. 2 soccer fields sit in the middle of the camp. The teens take to the pitch for 2 hours in the morning, finishing at 10 before it gets too hot.
We have mandatory hydration breaks and cooling tents on all the soccer fields.
Throughout the tour, HHS was eager to draw contrasts and make this point, that it as an agency is far better equipped to care for migrant children than various branches of federal law enforcement.
The Associated Press reported on dilapidated and overcrowded conditions at the U.S. Border Patrol station in Clint, Texas. Across the Rio Grande Valley, the Department of Homeland Security's Inspector General said kids at 3 facilities had no access to showers, and some children under 7 had been held in cramped Border Patrol stations for more than 2 weeks. The Associated Press got exclusive access to tour and film the Health and Human Services facility on the condition that we don't show children's or workers' faces. Kevin Dinnan, the CEO of BCFS, who ran the youth holding facility in Tornillo, says they took this contract on the condition that the government allowed access to human rights lawyers, lawmakers, and the media. His Texas nonprofit oversees hundreds of staff on site. They run dorms, dining, classrooms, a clinic, and their own emergency services. Childcare isn't normally the contractor's specialty.
In every response that we've done for ORR, it's been to keep kids out of CBP jail cells.
Until then, his group cares for hundreds of migrant children waiting to be reunited with family. John Moan, Associated Press, Carrizo Springs, Texas.
Government-sponsored child abuse. That's how the chairman of a House committee today described the treatment of migrant children in government detention facilities. Once released, some migrants go to temporary shelters for asylum seekers, including one here in San Diego. KPBS reporter Milena Spitzer has an update on the health of these children and families.
By far the most common things we see are things like scabies and lice, which we treat immediately before those families are commingled with other families.
Dr. Jennifer Tudor is the Deputy Chief Medical Officer for San Diego County. She says when families get dropped off after being in custody, they often present with a host of ailments. The shelter, run by Jewish Family Services, screens the families to check for communicable diseases. Many of the migrants were flown in from overcrowded detention facilities in Arizona and Texas. Since January, the shelter has received over 13,000 asylum-seeking families and treated 235 cases of influenza, 746 cases of lice, and 471 cases of scabies. Tudor says the quarantine of migrants prevented the spread of the flu into San Diego.
They get new clothes that have been donated, they get showers, and then if they need to be isolated or quarantined, families are kept together, but that all happens in a very safe area where they follow all of the environmental and infectious disease protocols so that none of these conditions are passed along.
In addition to communicable diseases, many children and families arrive at the shelter dehydrated and report they lacked access to sufficient water and nutritious food while in detention. Asylum seekers also say they were held in cold facilities, referring to the detention centers as hieleras or ice boxes. No treatment was known to be provided to the asylum seekers while they were in custody. Beyond the physical ailments contracted through their harrowing journey, many children show signs of trauma. While Dr. Tudor says the San Diego shelter is not the best place to treat the trauma that many migrants have suffered, the shelter follows a trauma-informed approach to make sure that people feel safe.
There are play areas, there are safe spots all around the shelter. It's very clear and very well enforced that there is no yelling, no screaming, no bullying, no violence, no weapons. So it's very much of a safe place.
Families typically only stay in the shelter between 12 and 72 hours before traveling on the final leg of their journey to meet family members or sponsors in the U.S. In the last 2 weeks, the shelter has seen a drastic drop in the number of migrants arriving. They attribute that drop in numbers largely to the Department of Homeland Security's Migrant Protection Protocols, or MPPs, in which families are being returned to Mexico to await their immigration proceedings. Despite the shelter's efforts, not all migrant families are lucky enough to reach San Diego and receive treatment, with many families forced back across the border to wait in Mexico and fend for themselves. Milena Spitzer, KPBS News.
About 30 million adults have kidney disease, according to the National Kidney Foundation. A move today by President Trump aims to help them manage their care. An executive order signed at the White House makes changes to Medicare payments for in-home dialysis treatment. It also calls to explore new policies to increase the number of kidneys available for donation. A girl from Alpine spent 2 years waiting for a kidney transplant while fighting a rare disease. Now she's doing well. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman says today she met the person who made it all possible.
Today at Rady Children's Hospital, a 14-year-old who was diagnosed with a rare kidney disease met the donor who saved her life. Cassidy Thomas anxiously waited with her parents to meet the woman who gave her a kidney.
It's nice to meet you, Bristol.
There's no handshakes so far.
Okay, great. Oh my God, thank you so much for all you've done for her, saving her life. Oh God, you're beautiful outside and in. Thank you.
Life-changing. It was amazing. We never thought we'd be able to meet her because some donors don't want to be met. And we got to meet her, and this day has been like accumulation of 7 years of Cassidy going through 7 different surgeries and getting her kidneys removed.
More than 500 people were tested to be a donor for Cassidy. Finally, in January, a match was found.
On my end, it was very easy and very low impact on my life. So, again, to have such a positive impact on somebody else's seems like an imbalance, but a very good one. I would highly recommend it. For me, it's been a positive experience.
I didn't know what to think, what to say, I just thank you's not enough.
Cassidy was blunt when asked about her 7-year ordeal.
It really sucked a whole lot.
But now things are getting back to normal.
So I can go swimming now in the river. I can go swimming in my friend's pool. I can go on roller coasters. I don't have to get hooked up early to my machine. I can stay up later. I don't have to restrict food.
Cassidy was surrounded by friends and family throughout the entire process. Today, her mom now so grateful for a happy ending that she wasn't sure would come.
Quite frankly, if she didn't get a kidney, she would have died. And getting a new kidney is life-saving.
Cassidy just graduated middle school and says she's looking forward to high school. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
So I think that... Is suicide ever rational? That's the topic of discussion for an event being put on by the Hemlock Society of San Diego, an organization that advocates for a person's right to die. I'm here now with the group's founder and a longtime leader of this movement, Faye Gersh. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, jumping right in, when is suicide ever rational?
When people see no alternatives to their physical suffering, when they have given careful thought, notified their family, discussed it with their doctor, and have a rational way to do it, which is nonviolent and doesn't involve more suffering than they already have.
And why is it important to have this discussion as scheduled later this month?
People keep asking the question, I'm thinking about ways to end my life when it gets to the point where it's too bad, or there's no hope, or I'm going to a nursing home. Is there a way, and is there a law, and how do I do it? And more people, as we get older and older, and we see what happens in nursing homes, want to know if there's a way out. And of course, we have so many states now, 9 states plus the District of Columbia, that do permit physician aid in dying, but it's a fairly restrictive law. It's for people who have 6 months or less to live. And there are lots of other people who are worried about dementia or other long-term neurological diseases or cancer where they're not terminal, but they would like to not have their last period of life in suffering, loss of personhood, loss of dignity. So it's a very important issue for many people, especially my age, who are facing the possibility of a prolonged dying.
And what about the idea that someone who is suffering but not terminal, that it's just a temporary period in the person's life, and once they work through it, there may be an opportunity to have a better quality of life. But if they make a decision during that darkest point in their life, then it's a decision that they can't take back. What about that argument that...
Well, we're totally supportive of suicide prevention in those kind of cases. I was a psychologist all my life, all my professional life, and people asked me that, especially when I started the Hemlock Society here in 1978. People said, well, why are you worried about my depression and ending my life when you're with the Hemlock Society? I said, that's two different things. I said, your problems would be, if you committed suicide, would be a permanent solution to a temporary problem. We can help you work your way through this period of suffering that you're going through.
And on July 21st, you're going to be one of the speakers at the Hemlock Society's event where you'll be tackling this issue. What do you hope people will get from this discussion?
The main thing is to destigmatize the word suicide, or at least to deconstruct it, so that people can make a distinction between a well thought out end of life with loved ones present in a peaceful way, because what's going to happen next is going to be worse, and they don't want to suffer that indignity of dying that way, from people who just broke up with a boyfriend, and we have terrible situations in the United States. Loneliness is a big situation for older people. Nursing homes are very unappetizing places to go to die. And there are a lot of situations where people would say, that's it, I've had enough. And we would like to be able to work with those people to tell them what other alternatives are available.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 1-800-273-TALK. Help is also available at suicidepreventionlifeline.org.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, the United Kingdom's ambassador to the U.S. resigns after private criticism of President Trump. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Well, this warm, sunny weather is expected to last through the weekend. Paul Williams has tonight's forecast.
Overall, we're still looking very clear with our satellite radar depiction of what's happening throughout Southern California. Hardly any activity whatsoever, and we're looking for it to stay pretty dry and active with plenty of sunshine throughout the duration. I'm AccuWeather meteorologist Paul Williams with your KPBS forecast. So we're looking for hot, warm, very warm conditions that continue to stay persistent throughout the Four Corners region, throughout Southern California, throughout our neck of the woods. Now, we are expecting for it to stay very comfortable right along the coast. But as you move further inland, it's going to dramatically warm up for us as you move a little bit further. Now, here's a little wider view of what's happening with the satellite radar depiction. You can see just how bone dry and inactive we are at this particular juncture. Scattered clouds moving more so throughout Northern California as far as any kind of flow that's coming off the Pacific that would pose a concern for us. Now, we will see a few more clouds throughout the evening hours, but we're expecting partly cloudy skies at about 65 degrees for tonight. Now, as you take a look overnight, we're looking at 64 in El Cajon and Chula Vista, 63 degrees, and mainly clear skies with a few scattered clouds here and there. Mount Laguna will drop to about 60 degrees throughout the overnight, and then we'll dip to 63 in Oceanside. Now, as far as tomorrow's forecast is concerned, San Diego warming to 75 comfortable degrees, 77 with plenty of sunshine in Oceanside. We're looking forward to warm to 84 degrees, and Mount Laguna with mostly sunny skies. And Ramona will warm up to a somewhat blistering 93, compared to everybody else immediately around Ramona. But the outlook for the late week indicates that we're going to still have very warm conditions staying persistent throughout the southwest corner of the country for our neck of the woods. Here's a look at the 5-day forecast for the coast for Thursday, 77 for the coast, 78 on Friday, 80 on Saturday and Sunday, and 81 on Monday with partly to mostly sunny skies. For inland, we're going to start at 87 on Thursday, 90 on Friday, mostly sunny and warm, 92 on Saturday and Sunday. Then we'll push it up to 93 on Monday with mostly sunny skies and still remaining very warm, if not downright hot. Temperatures in the mid to low 60s overnight. And then for the desert, we'll climb to 112 on Thursday, 113 on Friday, back to 112 on Saturday. Sunday and Monday will dip back to 110. I'm AccuWeather meteorologist with your KPBS forecast.
A plan to limit short-term vacation rentals in San Diego's beach communities is on hold. Assemblywoman Tasha Burner Horvath will delay the bill until next year. Her plan calls for rentals to be limited to 30 days per year unless the full-time resident is present. Short-term rental companies like Airbnb oppose the bill. Well, big crowds are expected this weekend for the Pride Festival here in San Diego. KPBS reporter Claire Tragesser found a local archive space that stores the history of the event and the LGBTQ community.
This is our little mini exhibit area.
Walter Meyer welcomes visitors to the Lambda Archives.
We are the LGBTQ Historical Society of San Diego. We collect, preserve, and teach the history of San Diego and Imperial counties in northern Baja California, Mexico.
Meyer is the manager of the archives, which officially opened its doors as a nonprofit back in 1987. Right away, visitors to the archives are greeted with a big variety of memorabilia, from an all-leather outfit worn by the singer Rob Halford, who lived in Hillcrest.
If you're a Judas Priest fan, you recognize the name. When he came out as gay, he took a lot of grief for it.
To a banner with a bright red heart and the words Blood Sisters.
The Blood Sisters were a group of lesbians who in the early days of AIDS stepped up to donate blood for their sick gay friends.
In fact, there are many pieces of history that remind visitors about the AIDS crisis. For example, an artifact from Auntie Helen's, a store in North Park that originally helped people with AIDS do their laundry. It was run by local activist Gary Cheatham.
They found a notebook that they thought they had lost. And it's just a notebook in which he wrote the names, addresses, and phone numbers of people for whom he was doing their laundry, doing their grocery shopping. And almost every entry in there has in the right margin a note with a death date. Passed to the Lord, 10/6/86. I'll love you forever, Gary. And just it's mute testimony to the horrors of the early days of AIDS, and this poor man who, as he himself is sick, is trying to take care of so many of his friends and so many of their needs.
But Lambda Archives also has an extensive library of books by and about members of the community, plus thousands of photos. And then what Meyer really likes best.
This is the actual archives of the archives.
Actual artifacts from local LGBTQ history.
We have banners. Every Dyke March, AIDS Walk, etc. We get the banners, we get the posters.
That includes a Stop LaRouche banner from 1986.
This was the No on 64 initiative.
A state ballot measure backed by Lyndon LaRouche that some feared would have led to quarantines of people with AIDS.
One of the many attempts to make life difficult for the LGBT community.
They also have yard signs from LGBTQ political candidates like Christine Kehoe, Bonnie DeBanis, and Steve Padilla.
We have other fun stuff up here.
Plus old gay bar signs like a stained glass window from Bacchus House, a North Park club that closed 10 years ago.
We've identified 168 gay bars that have come and gone. The peak was 1986. 40 were open at once. And then whether AIDS took its toll or just they hit saturation point, like a neighborhood can only support so many dry cleaners till some of them have to go out of business. But we are now down to about 14.
And they have tons of memorabilia from past Pride festivals.
Going back to early photographs, to Pride guides that they used to print a Pride guide every year. We have banners and posters. The first permitted Pride was 1975.
And yes, the Lambda Archives has that permit.
It's got a couple coffee stains and a little wrinkled and stuff.
But while older libraries and archives often receive family heirlooms, that hasn't happened much at Lambda.
And you can imagine that if, John Smith died and his family came out from Wisconsin to look at his stuff and they found stuff like this, they'd burn it.
That's part of the challenge of running an LGBTQ archives.
Because the world was so closeted back then, we don't have a lot of really early stuff. Prior to the 80s and 90s, really, most people didn't want their picture taken in gay pride or taken in a gay bar. It could ruin your life.
He says that's why it's important to store what they do have and items from more recent history to remind people in the future that LGBTQ discrimination wasn't that far in the past. Claire Tragesser, KPBS News.
You can visit the Lambda Archives Monday through Thursday, and it's best to contact them in advance. Now here's a recap of tonight's top stories. A military property near Old Town might become a new transit hub. Sandag and the military will talk about developing the Spay War property on Pacific Highway. Plans could include a transit connection to the airport. Officials hope to have a development plan in the next few years. Vice President Mike Pence is expected in San Diego tonight. Today he arrived in Central California, where he was briefed on recent earthquakes. Tomorrow, the Vice President will visit Navy and Coast Guard officials in Coronado. Border Protection says it has largely reduced the number of unaccompanied children in its custody. Last month, nearly 3,000 were being held. Now the agency says that number is 200. Some of those children have been moved to a new shelter in southern Texas. And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, the citizenship question and how President Trump is still trying to find a way to change the 2020 census. And on Midday Edition, the world's first LGBTQ mariachi band, how they're using music to challenge inequality in Southern California. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.